Latimer City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
That's fabulous stuff. Let's see. Okay, so some of you have probably heard about the fact that Fox News paid out last week nearly $800 million to settle a lawsuit. They were being sued for defamation during the 2020 election, and they were accused of being in league with some people that were saying false things about the voting machines. The company that made, one of the companies that made the voting machine sued them and recovered nearly $800 million. Earlier this week, Fox also fired their lead commentator, the person who's got the highest rating on Fox, Tucker Carlson. So there's some fallout, and there's going to be another lawsuit that is also still pending against Fox for $2.7 billion, and this one is being another voting machine case. Smartmatic is also suing them. So Fox is in a little bit of trouble. I'm not really here to report about that so much. What I'm more interested in is what are sort of the ramifications, what's the effect going to be on the media landscape, because that's more really what I'm interested in. Let's see if I can make this thing work. Okay. First of all, when you consider the verdict, the amount of the money, 3 or 4 years ago, if you looked at Dominion voting machines, they were worth maybe $150 million, something like that. This Fox settlement that they just got is, 7 or 8 times the value of the company. And so you kind of look at that and you go, gee, how did they get all that money? I mean, if you're in a defamation suit, basically what you have to prove in the United States is you have to prove that somebody has lied about you and it's caused you some damage. If the company that is making the suit is a public entity, or they are a person, who's a public official, then you also, in addition, have to prove something called actual malice. And I'll get to that in just a second. I'll talk about why that's important and why, unfortunately, since this case got settled, we don't get that actual standard being challenged again in the courts. In any event, big money victory for Dominion, and probably going to be for Smartmatic as well. What I'm more interested in really, and I think probably from our standpoint what's more interesting is we are living in an area, 30 years ago there was no Fox News. Fox News is now the largest cable network in the United States by far. They started the same year as MSNBC in the United States, and they're roughly twice as big as MSNBC. What I call the Fox effect is the effect that they have not only on the news, but also on their competitors. And I'm really looking at 4 different things that Fox does. The first is that they have sensationalized the news. If you watch Fox News, you'll see that the language, there's breaking news, there's news of the hour, you get dramatic music that goes along now with the news. That wasn't really true 30 years ago until Fox came along and really started to sensationalize the news. When I talked about a month ago here, one of the things I said is if the media wants to get a little bit more in touch with people or a little more trust, they need to get some of that sensationalism out of the news. Not every story is a big breaking news story. Not every story needs to have that kind of big attention drawn to it. Second thing I think that happens with the Fox News effect is that they cater to their audience. Fox recognized early on not everybody was going to like to watch them. And so they went after a specific audience. And they feed that audience. And that's what happened in this suit. They basically went out and they gave the audience what they thought the audience wanted. They were worried about what might happen if they didn't give them they had reported early on the election in 2020 in the United States, and they'd gotten some bad feedback because they had initially signaled that Arizona had been won by Biden. That was reported before the other major networks, and so they got a lot of their viewers were mad that they said that. A lot of their viewers supported Trump. They didn't like what Fox was doing, and Fox was afraid, and their internal memos showed they were afraid that these people were going to start to go to other networks, such as One America News, Newsmax. The third thing that happens as a result of the Fox effect is you see that the messengers all try to stay on point. Now, other companies have picked that up as well. If you look at something like MSNBC in the morning, they have a morning program on in the morning called Morning Joe, and they'll get 8 different people on, all of whom are saying more or less exactly the same thing. You know, that you get that messengers saying sort of the same kind of message, certainly introduced by Fox and probably copied by other people. And finally, Fox recognized that they were going to be rewarded for being different, for differentiating their news from other people's news. So that's really the effect that you see of what's happened in the news and in the news generally. And I think it's had an effect on the other stations as well. But it certainly has been one of the keys, or 4 of the keys in this case, to Fox News' success over the years. Okay, so let's just kind of quickly look at some of the lawsuit and what happened here. Why did Fox put on commentators who they knew were not saying the truth, were spreading false information? Well, again, it kind of gets back to that second thing that I said before, which is feeding your audience, feeding their appetite, giving them not necessarily the truth, but what they thought their audience wanted. In fact, whoops, let me go back here. I think of it, or I liken it to something called The Little Shop of Horrors. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the play, The Little Shop of Horrors. It's kind of a funny musical where you have a plant that is in a shop, and the owners of the shop begin to feed the plant, and the plant gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and soon they're having to give the plant meat to make the plant grow and grow and grow. And the plant's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually eats the entire audience and eats everybody that's in the shop and all the customers and everything else. It's a joke, it's kind of a funny little play, but it also has to do a little bit with what happens if you try to give your audience what you think they want rather than feeding them the truth. And in fact, that's exactly what former Fox personality Bill O'Reilly said about Fox as a result of the suit. Fox chose to feed their audience instead of telling them the truth. Okay, what was the response of the on-air personalities, such as Tucker Carlson before he got fired? What was his response to the $800 million settlement? And in most cases, for those of you who have watched Fox or who are regular viewers of Fox, you probably didn't hear much of anything. What you heard maybe was their media person, Howard Kurtz, went on and mentioned the Fox settlement. But for the most part, Fox tried to keep quiet about it and didn't say much of anything. They buried their heads in the sand. Basically, they didn't want that reported out there much. And in fact, when I came in today, Ren, one of the things Ren said to me was, gee, I'm glad you told me about that when you sent it to me a week ago. I hadn't really read much about it. That's, I think, what happened with this Fox News settlement. A lot of people heard about it if they were reading certain kinds of media. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people probably still don't know about it. Okay, let's skip over that. Let me get back to New York Times versus Sullivan for just a minute, and defamation. Defamation is basically lying about somebody else. If I tell a story about somebody and it gets published somewhere and it's false, they can sue me if I've damaged them. In Thailand, you don't even need that. If I, for example, say, I don't know if you remember this, a couple of years ago, somebody wrote a bad review. I think it was Hua Hin, or I'm not sure exactly where it was, maybe Kolang. Somebody had written a bad review about a hotel. And the review was true. At least the person thought it was true. But they were then going to be sued for defamation. Eventually they settled, it never went to court. But in Thailand, it doesn't even have to be false. In the United States, going back now to when they were a colony, they said with the original case that you did have to, if you published something that was false about somebody, then that was defamation. It had to be something that was false. In New York Times versus Sullivan, this goes back now 60 years to 1964, the court in the United States determined if it is a public official, if it's an interesting type of article, then in that case, not only does the statement have to be false, but you have to show that there was actual malice in making the statement. In other words, that the person making the statement or publishing the statement either knew it was false or acted with what is called reckless disregard for the truth. In other words, they just threw something out there. The reason I think this whole thing is a little bit of a problem is because that's a really hard standard to show. It's really hard to prove that somebody knew something that was false when they put it out there. Fox, however, was scared of this. They decided they didn't want it to go to trial, and they ended up settling. Okay, let me go back to one of the things that I talked about last month here is the low trust in the media. And one of the ways I think that you could get a little of the trust back was by journalists using a little more neutral kind of language, getting rid of some of that sensationalism. In fact, in the United States in 2019, according to a Reuters survey, 2021 rather, 29% of the people in the US trust the media. Think about that for just a minute. That means we're all getting news every day. Some people right now looking at their smartphones, getting information right this minute from different kinds of places. Think about what it means that 7 out of 10 of us don't trust what we're getting. We think what we're getting is BS somehow. How do you increase that? I mean, I've been a journalist for a number of years. It's important for me to have some credibility when I write something. How do you get that kind of trust? One of the ways, I think, is by using less sensational language. A second way, though, I think would have been, and it's probably not going to happen now, is if the courts were to overturn that New York Times v. Sullivan standard, which makes it so hard to prove defamation or that somebody has acted with reckless disregard for somebody else. If you lowered the standard a little bit, once you prove somebody has made a statement that's false about you, now shift the burden around. Make the burden on the news company to actually show that they did a little bit of research or a little bit of work to try to get a true story out there. I think, yeah, that's about it. Thanks, guys.
I would question the interpretation of Fox's motivation that they've been putting out lately, that they were simply responding to the will of their audience, sort of blaming the public for what they did. I think that the Fox is actually a political organization, and that their mission is not, or it's not primarily anyway, the reporting of the news as it happens, but the persuasion of the public to right-wing causes, which they have championed pretty consistently. And I would say that their reason for promoting the theory that that Dominion had faked votes the purpose was not simply to satisfy their audience, but to overturn the election and put Donald Trump in for a second term.
Or vice versa.
I guess that's not a question, but
well,
I made my little speech there.
Yeah, I certainly a valid point. I guess I would just say I'm more convinced that Fox recognizes that they have a certain portion of the public that wants to hear what they have to say, and that they're not really trying to persuade a larger group. In fact, one of my friends wrote to me about this last week and said, you know, we really don't have a general public in the United States anymore. It's just a lot of different sections, specific, and I think he's probably right about that. When I grew up in the United States, it was 3 networks, and those 3 networks putting out the news, even though they were somewhat different, they were all pretty much saying the same thing. They were all, ABC, NBC, and CBS, all pretty close in what they were saying. A little bit different personalities, but not really much different. I don't think Fox really is trying to get to the American public. I think they're trying to get to their audience. Again, my opinion. And also, that's how they make money. I mean, if you look at the memos that came out, the internal memos from people like Tucker Carlson, they were worried that they were losing market share, not to MSNBC and CNN, but to OAN, One American News, and Newsmax, and more conservative type groups. But thanks for your comment. I certainly a valid point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just to make a comment, there is a statement that we had with a paper in the United Kingdom called The Guardian, which in actual fact was the Manchester Guardian, and the editor made a comment is free, facts are sacred. Fox News was Mr. Murdoch. Full stop. It still is. He's 92, he just had a breakup of an engagement, etc. His history in the United Kingdom was, you have the News of the World, which hacked everybody's phone to get news, etc. That was Mr. Murdoch. Really, we talk about not trusting the media. I worked in the provincial media. I ran evening papers, I ran weekly papers. And all the editors reported to me, and I can tell you, we told the truth, and it was not political. Fox News is political, full stop, directed by Mr. Murdoch. Why would Tony Blair, when he was up for re-election, fly all the way to Australia? Tony Blair flew all the way to Australia to see Mr. Murdoch. He was the savior. He was the guy that chose the government, persuaded people because his influence. So I think what you say, I understand, I know the case, he will go on, etc. But don't go on about the staff who work for Fox News. They were taking orders from Mr. Murdoch. He was the man. I know the instances, I know the UK, I know the printing plant, I know the operations, I know the Times newspapers, etc., and I know they had non-exec directors, etc. But he was the one that when you got a telephone call, you listened. Full stop. He was political, and in elections in the United Kingdom, everybody wanted to see him and talk to him and discuss it, etc. Because you'll find that they switched allegiances. One was Labour, one was Conservative. So yes, Fox News had 750,000. I wish I had 10% of that. There's 2 more instances, etc. He's 92. He will continue as he is. He is what he is, and he always was what he is. Full stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the firing of Tucker Carlson, who was his number one employee, is a pretty good, indication of the kind of power that Murdoch has.
Yeah. On Fox News, it's been widely publicized, I think, especially in recent news that I've been watching from the U.S., that Fox News is not really a news organization. They are a political organization. And there have been a number of cases brought against Fox News in the past where their primary defense has been, nobody would believe our presenters because they know they lie. And it's, how can anybody be so stupid as to believe our presenters? And if you look at Fox News, I've read this, I don't know, firsthand the facts, but almost all of their shows are not listed as news shows. They are actually listed as opinion shows. And so when they're taken to court and they're lying, Fox's defense is, that's an opinion show. We have a right to air opinions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be fact. And they've won quite a number of court cases based on the fact that they are not news, they're opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, and that may have just changed. When you get a nearly $800 million lawsuit and you got another $2.7 billion lawsuit, that may have changed. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you so much for doing this. And Patrick said to me, I would like to do it while it's very topical. And I thought, okay, the vacancy I have is after Dr. Penguin. Normally I would have said too tough a thing to follow Dr. Penguin, and full marks to Patrick for doing it, because it's really tough. And my personal thanks for bringing it to my attention. So, well, a really amazing morning at the club, magic morning, and magically large